morning, good afternoon, good evening, even everybody. Welcome to the latest episodes of the Jason's Take On podcast. We're thrilled today to have a new guest with us, Philipp Wolf from Custify, and we're going to be talking about the state of customer success in 2022. I can't believe it's already it is the end of January. It's the end day in January, but we're already a month into 2022. But we're going to have a chat with Philipp just to talk through some of the challenges we're seeing. What are some of the changes that he's seeing in his experience? Jason, anything you'd like to say before we step in?
Yeah, just thank you everyone for joining us. We're excited to have you back for what's going on our third year now. So this is great. Very excited to be here. And Phil, thank you so much for joining us. This is really exciting to have you here.
Thank you guys for having me.
Philipp, look, a big welcome. Just for our listeners, if they don't know already, you're the CEO and founder of Custify. Custify is a customer success management platform really aimed at B2B SaaS businesses. So really a lot of our listeners really ties in a lot with what they're doing. Your background is really development focused, which I thought is really interesting. You've spent a good portion of your time before Custify with Avira building out their protection antivirus products. A really interesting way to come into it. Could you give an introduction for our listeners? Tell us a bit more about yourself, your journey, and what brought you guys to create Custify.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I was in a different industry. Let's say I was in the security industry for quite a while, around about like 20 years of my life, I would say. And in the end, however, of this journey, I was spending a lot of time like in product management and building products. And that's also when I got in touch with other SaaS companies, with the leadership team typically. And in that time, it came to my attention that these teams typically knew a lot about customer acquisition, typically by the cent even, like PPC teams and paid acquisition, and then we do this marketing channel and so forth. And when it came to the question like, okay, what do you guys do actually once the customer is a customer? And yeah, we sent them some newsletters or this. So it was clear that there was this huge discrepancy in between what these SaaS companies were investing and knowing about customer acquisition versus customer retention. And that was that was 8 years ago or something. And that was the first moment when I actually started looking into this entire retention churn topic for subscription-based businesses, given that already back then the market of subscription-based businesses was already growing a lot. Many traditional businesses, Adobe as the best example, went from a classical approach into the subscription-based business. So I knew that this market is definitely going to grow. And I didn't know it was customer success, a term. I wasn't so familiar with it back then. And but this research, when I started to look into what are the tools out there, what can people do, what can growing SaaS companies use, and certainly the landscape was a bit different back then from the tools that were available when we started Custify around like 5 years ago. But that was the initial trigger to actually create something that helps these growing SaaS companies that are not the enterprises of the world to have also a tool in hand that is easy to use, easy to install, integrates into their environment quickly. So that was the trigger back then.
I love that because it is, as you said, a lot of organizations are challenged with it. They struggle with it. What do we need to do? A lot of them are still trying to figure out what customer success means for them, for their customers. Yeah. One of the things you talk about at Custify is how you guys have built a systematic approach to helping customers be successful. And I think your background building technology teams and product teams and ultimately great products helps with this. But what do you mean by a systematic approach there? Can you expand on that a little, please?
Yes, I would say we have two sorts of customers when they come to us. One, they are well prepared. They have a customer success strategy. They have all their data in place. And the others, they need a bit more guidance. And for them, we have established a process over the years that we refined, of course, a bit, but it helps them to get this consulting component in the beginning when they start off. So basically, best practices or what are other SaaS companies doing? What could you also implement? And what we typically do is going as far as looking into their business. So they basically would, in a Zoom session, they would basically explain their product and their business to us, to our customer success team. And based on what we see there, we will then give them advices on the tracking. Because one crucial part and that's, I guess, also something we can talk about when it comes to trends for customer success, one crucial part is data. And if the data isn't right, the CS team will make decisions that are simply based on wrong assumptions or based on no data, meaning I cannot even take an informed decision. Mm-hmm. So that is our approach here to help them really get the right data in the platform. That means we make sure that we connect to the right systems in their environment, like the CRM, the payment gateway, and these things. But we also make sure that we get the right data from the product, because typically all these health scores and everything that is used to measure how likely this customer is to renew. Those things are typically based on data touch points, on adoption touch points within the product. And if the CS team doesn't have this information, typically it's very difficult for them to reach out to the right customer with the right message at the right time, to sum it up.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting too, because talking about having the data and the touch points. And when you first started, you're asking, what do people do after you have your customer? Oh, we send them a newsletter. And it sounds very different of, oh, we have a newsletter to data to really customize the message and think about and be intentional about what we're doing. I'm curious, in the 5 years since you've been around, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen, your services and ways of thinking and ways of working with customers, and even in customer success in general?
So I would say the position got more and more, as the position of a CSM is more and more challenging. It's a very demanding position. Knowing ourselves, we recruit, of course, constantly for our team, and knowing that we work with other CS teams, also knowing their pain firsthand. So I think that the CSM position itself, I wouldn't say it's like a product manager, but it goes clearly into this direction for many of our customers, at least. Why? You need to have a empathic part and a part that likes to work with customers, right? So you need to be empathic, you need to understand, you need to be able to read the room, you need to be able to de-escalate certain things that maybe some support ticket escalated and so forth. So you need to be able to jump in there. So you have this human component there. Then you have this business component there. So very often of the time, you need to understand your customer's business in order to help them best possible with your product. Every business is slightly different. Typically none of the customers is the same. So you need to understand that part. So you have a business understanding need for this position. And then you have, last but not least, also this technical position, depending a little bit, of course, on the product that you are selling. But many of our customers, they have a software product. And many of the times they have a software product where the audience is not necessarily technically. So that means you have a non-technical audience supposed to use this tool, let's say a marketing tool or these kind of things, that you need to help them to get to the full potential. That means you also have this technical component there. You need to understand your product, which is typically a software product. So there are some technology components in it, and also the way that your customers are using the product. And these three things combined make a good CSM. And that's actually quite if you think about it, that's quite a demanding position. And I wouldn't say that the demand was that high, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I would say the demand towards a CSM gets higher and higher. And that, of course, also means that our customers face difficulties in hiring CSMs. So the market gets a little bit more uneasy there, and more SaaS companies building these teams means, of course, even more demand of CSMs out there. That is something that we definitely saw changing over the last couple of years. It was much easier, I would say, to hire a CSM 5 years ago than it is now for the average SaaS company.
I think like you're saying, CS has changed in itself over the last 5, 6 years massively. And you're seeing such a demand for these individuals, but also people with experience that can apply to very different roles. It's not just about outreaches to customers and being proactive. There are some organizations where CS means very different things. You will have an element of support. So it's finding the right individuals to do that. And I think one of the key things is we've seen, we talked in the introduction, I mean, the last 2 years with COVID, I think have been very different for everybody. We've seen some huge changes in transformations in businesses and how businesses work, and even how people work, with this big shift now to remote working and even hybrid working. What impact do you think some of these changes now with how business have changed over the last 2 years are having on how we work with customers, with how we work as businesses?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the most controversial topic, I think, that we have when we onboard new customers, and where there is still no clear strategy, is the definition of responsibilities of a CSM. I would say there is a huge agreement on retention. Okay, so if you talk retention, then this is almost unarguably belonging to CS. But then the question comes, who exactly does the upsell or the cross-sell or the renewal talk? Is that sales or is that CS? And we have quite controversial opinions there within our customer base. That's very interesting. And there's the only trend that I can say for sure is that the revenue responsibility, that becomes a clear trend. So that the CS team is carrying a number, and they have this, and that becomes a bit more of a number, but a bit more of a trend. But I can still see that many of the time a sales team would still be involved in upsell, cross-sells, or renewals. Then onboarding teams, I think, is something that we also see as a trend. So splitting the CS team into someone that is specifically responsible for onboardings. And coming back to your question regarding what changed in the pandemic, this is something that interesting enough has changed from our observation with customers. On-site meetings that we typically saw, they are completely gone, and everybody knows that, and it's just like broadly accepted. Even in the larger customers that we have, like where on-site meetings had been a must for the onboarding team or for the CS team, that is just not the case anymore. And I don't think that's coming back anytime soon, or maybe probably ever.
It's amazing how customers have accepted that as well, haven't they?
Yes,
I think people have
totally
seen the benefit of it. There's no need to travel. And even
totally.
I think the other flip side is you could work from anywhere, and it really changes your mindset.
We had, however, some customers that was quite a challenge for them, because it wasn't like the pandemic was introducing itself and said, guys, in 6 months I'm there, so maybe you prepare your products so we don't need to go on site anymore. This came pretty quickly, and that was indeed a challenge for many of our customers that had this component of, on-site team coming there, taking care of your team, and they had all processes tied around this onboarding event. And all of a sudden they couldn't do it anymore. They still managed to do it, but that was certainly something that imposed quite some challenges on those companies. Not saying that this is the majority, but you would be surprised how many companies were still sending onboarding teams to customers even in the 2020 time.
Sure. So Philipp, I like what you were saying about the controversy that always comes up around sales and CS and all that, because I find when working with CS customers that sort of the rule of three is like a third of their time working with their CS team, CS leadership, a third of their time working directly hands-on with customers, and a third of the time really doing that internal alignment where that needs to go. I'm curious as to how you see most companies actually addressing that sales CS alignment, and what are the biggest hurdles there to them getting this figured out, and how does that impact what you guys do implementing a CS technology tool?
So I would say it depends a lot on the product that they have. What we clearly see is that if the sales team is heavily involved in the purchasing process, so if they have a lengthy sales process and there's eventually even a pre-sales engineer involved or these kind of situations, then the sales team is typically also much more involved afterwards. If we have a situation which is more bit like our own process in Custify, so of course we have a sales team and they take you through the demo of the product and they take you through the pricing and so forth. But then they do the handover. In our example, in Custify, we don't have a salesperson involved anymore after basically the agreement is signed. But this is something where there's still a mixed situation within our customer base. This is the most controversial one. And the other one, and that's actually one of our most clicked blog articles, is the difference between customer success and support. How much is the involvement of a CS person in these not proactive, but reactive customer questions? And it's also difficult to draw the line there for some customers, us included. We have a challenge there because the questions that our customers have are typically not be able to be answered by someone in the first level of support that, like a random person. Why? Because for this question, you typically need to understand the business. You typically need to understand the history of this customer and so forth. So who's better in this information than the CSM, right? So you tend, of course, towards getting the CSM drawn into this kind of conversations. But we have a pretty good experience. You said one third. I guess I would, in our case, put it probably in quarters and add another a piece in the puzzle, which is this support component, where if it's not something that a normal support person can handle, in our case at least, the CSM is taking care of this. Now, this is absolutely debatable, and you can probably have different opinions on that. We have a pretty good experience with this model because the way that we can help the customer if they have an issue is much more informed, much more quicker, and in much more depth if we would versus handling someone in the support team having this question answered there.
How are your customers reacting to that? Are they coming to kind of a consensus on what the CSM should be doing? Do they agree with that way of working?
You mean if they implement our model themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. If they listen to it, or rather, no, not if they implement your model, but how they work with you guys. Do they use your CSMs like you're intending them to use them?
Oh, yes. So they appreciate this, of course,
Okay.
a lot. So for them, for the customer, this is, of course, the most convenient way, because I have one person that I can trust to. I know that any question that I ask, this person already knows all my history and so forth, versus I have an anonymous chat where I don't know the other person, and it's someone from a support center that let me look into your account first, and takes them,
Yeah.
I don't know, 20 minutes to understand the last
Yeah.
support tickets and so forth. So for the customer experience, this is, in my opinion, something very good. The question is just if that matches your philosophy of CS, right? So this is a bit of a debatable question there. For us, it works well.
Are you finding with customers that you have to explain what customer success is to them, or do they have a very different understanding?
I wouldn't say that, no, but I would say that some of the customers, they lack of a customer success strategy. So it's not 100%, the strategy isn't clear. So like questions, of course, that our team has throughout the onboarding is like, how high touch do we want to get with customer? Because do we put a lot of focus on automation and send them emails, or do we put a lot of focus on creating notifications, tasks, and so forth? So where are you there? Right. So and then many of the times you realize, there's not, so the customer didn't really think so much about the strategy there. And it starts with these simple questions. It goes, do you guys want to do QBRs? And if so, how long is the QBR? What kind of things do you want to discuss with the customer? Do you have a segmentation of low touch and high touch customers? Where do you draw the line? These are all questions that are part of this strategy. And that is something not every customer has prepared or laid out completely, which is fine. Which is also, I guess, why they come to us, so that we can actually help them to map this out. And also we can say, okay, if you do it this way, you probably have advantages. Yes, it is. However, you also probably have to invest a bit more, because if you really go this high touch model, you cannot do this with 2 CSMs, and you cannot have a CSM handling a portfolio of 100 customers. That simply, wouldn't scale, that wouldn't work.
It is. It's that scalability that's the hard bit, isn't it? You can put in place the right processes, people, tools. Like I say, we can implement Custify. How do we make sure it scales? How do you think, if we look a bit further out, and we've talked a lot about kind of what we see as the state of customer success this year, but if you were to look out over the next 3 years to say 2025, what do you see some of the big changes are in what customer success will be, what it means to businesses, and how and what impact that those changes would have on businesses and our customers?
So I would say, which is good for us as a business, of course, but I would say, it's not good for you and for me as a customer. Most businesses don't have customer success implemented in the stage that they should have. We see clearly that many SaaS companies, they start too late. They have a lot of processes in place already. Tools are not interconnected. It's hard to get the information in one place and so forth. So they start at a very late stage. And that's one trend that I would say, if you are projecting the 5 years, also from an investor perspective, what they will push down to the companies before they do an investment is that this moment when people start implementing customer success is definitely going much more to the beginning of the company, early stage. So maybe your 10th hire is a CSM. Okay, so right after support, you also think about customer success. You don't postpone this to Series A. So you have very early on that mindset in the company, because it's also a mindset. It's a commitment of top level management. It's a proactive mindset that goes through many departments. And you guys know that probably as well. When you talk to CSMs, they are typically very connected in the company, right? They talk to product. They need to understand the roadmap. They need to communicate this to the customer. Then they talk to sales. They need to understand eventually new pricings, upsell opportunities, etc. So they are there. They understand support. They understand SLAs. So they are quite interconnected also within the company. So I think that is one thing, starting earlier with customer success, that becomes a trend. Then when we look at the CSM position itself, I think the trend that we discussed earlier will also continue. So it won't be easier to find CSMs, first of all. That trend goes on. And the CSM position itself will also be even more demanding when we think about capabilities such a person needs to have. Yeah, I think so. That would be the things coming to mind. Earlier start and more systemized eventually start. So you guys also know probably that 5-6 years ago, there wasn't as much as content and education content there that it is now. So now you have a lot more there. You have a lot more podcasts. You have a lot more people sharing their best practices. And that helps, of course, other companies that don't have it implemented yet to get started quickly and more efficiently.
Yeah, and in my business, we do a lot of consulting, and half of our customers are customer success companies coming in and working with the software vendors to put in their processes and strategy and develop their teams and all that good stuff. And the other half of our customers are actually the buyers of software, their prospects and their customers, and they help with change management, user adoption. And we have a lot of them actually come to us after systems been live for a couple of years and people aren't using it. And one of the things that I find fascinating is there's still a big disconnect between what the softwares, how they approach CS versus the buyers, how they approach change and adoption and creating and perceiving value, and it's still there. And what I'm finding as well is when I talk with buyers of software, they're like, we have 15, 20 different systems in here or more, and that's even a small company. And they're experiencing a lot of different flavors of customer success. And they're like, no, this one, I was on a call with their vendor the other day, didn't have a CS group, didn't have a clue about business outcomes, wasn't focused on it. And it was painful. It was painful. I could just see my customer going, kind of thing. So I'm curious, because one of the things I've maintained is that as more and more software come into the customer success world and start to invest in it earlier and really go out there, increasingly, I think it's going to be a source of competitive advantage. And they're going to be able to point to, oh, our customer success team will get you more value than this other prospective software company. You should buy from us, and here's the proof to it. I'm wondering, since you work with so many CS teams, what are you seeing in terms of how they're differentiating their CS to some of their competitors? Or in the next 3 to 5 years, do you see that becoming a bigger issue? If we don't have a really strong CS program and can't prove to it, it's going to slow down our sales, and it's definitely going to slow down our retention.
For sure. So let me ask you a question before I answer that question. So
okay.
I'm sure that you guys also use some tools. Now, was there a time, first of all, at all, where you had this experience that, wow, someone really proactively, like you had this moment where CS really mattered, like someone proactively reached out to you because you didn't onboard correctly, or you did have some questions there, you didn't use the product? Did you have this experience?
No, I think I've had a few automated drip emails and things like that. I will say I had one company, actually it was Upwork, which surprised me of all things, where they did a very nice proactive, here's how to get the most out of your Upwork experience. Can we get on a call for a 15-minute thing to get you there? And they had it tight and right. And I'm like, this was a really fantastic 15-minute onboarding that helped me move forward and actually spend money with their platform and their tool. But for the other tools that I've used, no, I've actually been incredibly disappointed.
Yeah, see, and ask this question to almost anyone, and the answer will always be that. So that means there's still a lot of room for you to differentiate yourself from the competition by just doing, let's say, best practice in customer success. And I think most of the customers, the CS teams are not necessarily so much aware of what their competitors are doing, at least not that we talk about it that much in our conversations with them. But what they clearly want to do is getting this proactiveness in the conversation, getting this human touch in the relationship, and then that probably will already make the difference, right? Because this experience that you just told me, I can totally share it. I'm using 20 SaaS tools myself. And I had one really good experience last year where I was like, wow, okay, that was nice. That was a proactive outreach who came in the right moment with the right message. I felt personally care of, and I had also an issue, and it was like solved immediately. It was like magic. It was like awesome. This was like in the book. But all the others I had from well-known brands also, where it's really not that great of an experience. So I think to make a difference there is even not that hard for CS teams. If you look at what most companies are doing, probably included their competitors.
Are you still using those other 19 tools?
Not all of them, but most of them I'm still using. That's right.
That's the problem. Is I think.
Yeah,
I think
the pain might not be big enough yet.
Yeah, but it shows a maturity. But also you think some organizations just aren't focusing on this. If they put the effort in it and the investment in it, there's so much more growth that they could get, and so much more value they could drive for you. And I don't, to your point, Philip, I don't think it's difficult.
It's not. It's really just even if you don't have the perfect process, even if you don't have the perfect team, and you can take off all the customers, Pareto principle, 20% of the things implemented will probably already fix 80% of the issues, and that makes already a huge difference to most of what your competitors will do. So that would be also my advice, like for the audience, if they haven't started doing those things. Offboarding things, like we did an experiment with one of our customers about offboarding, and we really researched a lot in this topic. Proper offboarding. Almost no SaaS company has a proper offboarding in place. It's so sad. It's not just to reduce the churn, but it's also, I have so much to say about your product and you don't care. I left your product because I'm disappointed, and I have so many things in my mind that I would share with you so you can improve. You don't care. You just let me go. Why is that?
And if I'm not sharing with you, if they're not sharing with you, they're definitely going to share them with all the people in the network.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a simple process. You should do it.
Yes.
People aren't thinking. we've got to think about the whole customer journey, and
Yes.
part of that journey could be them leaving. Let's make
Yes.
sure we do that so they're saying the right things to our competitors, the market.
It's not even just about like saying the right things after and having, let's say, split up in a good way. It's also all the learnings that you can take. Like, why does this customer? There's some churn that you will never be able to. They go out of business. They got acquired, and the guys use another platform, and they just you're out. There are some things you cannot influence. But I would say for a good portion of your churn, you can learn so much from these offboarding conversations, because they will tell you exactly what went wrong. So you can do this. It's like gold. It's gold that's out there, and you just need to to take it and do something about it. And it's really simple, actually.
And I think I've never really thought a lot about offboarding, but I'm going to definitely focus on that more too. But I think the other piece of that is for your customer that's leaving, or your former customer, it's a chance for them to have a lessons learned about what they need to be doing differently internally with their next software vendor. I think if you can, we're parting the ways and we're sad to see you go, but let's see how we both can get something from this exit process, and how we both.
That's the key thing. It's mutual, isn't it? You want to provide feedback to them as well.
Exactly. And we get these excuses. Yeah, but I have a low touch business. I cannot afford to go with offboarding calls with all my customers. True, you can't, but it's about a portion of them, right? So of course you don't need to go with all of them, but at least start with a small portion of them, because if you talk to probably 100 of them, you don't need to talk to all the 1,000. 100 will probably give you a very good picture of why are customers leaving you at this given point in time. What's wrong with the service? What's wrong with the product? Haven't they even got to the aha moment of your product? So where's the problem? So this the subset of customers that you need to talk to will already give you a good picture. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't take the time to learn that, you're going to keep making the same mistakes. And the definition of insanity is doing the same stuff over and over.
You will probably still figure things out, because also existing customers, they might have the same pain, but they might not leave you. So you might find it out in QBRs, but it takes you much more time, first of all, and it's much more expensive, because the churn will still happen until you find out.
One of the things that we work with our clients too is how to really set expectations during those kickoff and early stages. And one of the things we go over them is, how do you set the expectations of, here's we'll do a QBR, here's we're going to ask you to give us a reference, here's we're going to ask you for this, here's where we're going to ask you to participate in a product roundtable, so we make sure we build out the other things. And I think part of that could be, and here at some point, if you decide to leave, we're going to request that you join us for this offboarding conversation, so we can both learn and improve. And setting those expectations right up front, I think it's a prenuptial agreement before your marriage. Like, here's how we're going to break up the right way. Let's feel good about it. Because
it sets expectations, doesn't it? It says that I care about this. We as a business care about this, and we've got a process in place. So if something does happen, we want to know why. And if there's something we missed, tell us. And as you said, Philip, it's how do we feed that back into the loop for us?
And this doesn't mean that you can't have a cancel button in your subscription, right? So if you sell to small SMBs, or you have to have this, you have to have the ability there anyway. But this means still that maybe in the beginning you have set the stage, and you might not get everybody on the phone. You might not be having time with everyone who leaves you, but a good again, probably 20% of the conversations will give you really good insights already.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And kind of like sometimes your employees leave your company but come back. Sometimes your customers,
absolutely, And if you know why they've left, there's things you can do. So give them a call in a month's time.
Exactly.
We heard you. We've made some changes in product, or we've made some changes in this process. We'd love you to try it again. And people are willing to come back because you've done it that right way.
Exactly, and you valued their opinion.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, that's huge.
Philip, look, superb conversation. A really big thank you for joining. What we do like to do with all of our guests before leaving is give you one final question, our bold challenge question. And the one for you is, what one big change should we be focusing on this year when it comes to customer success? Start earlier. I love it. I think from all of the stuff you said as well, I was trying to think, what's he going to say? Because there's so many different nuggets that you could pick there. But I like that. I love it. Start earlier. Jace, we've said before, we've done episodes on this, but it should be part of the sales process. You should be thinking about it up front, talking to customers. And lastly, Philip, but please give a shameless plug for what you guys do at Custify for our listeners.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you are looking for a customer success platform and you are a SaaS business, head over to Custify.com. We have all the details there. Subscribe for a demo. Maybe you're lucky. I still do about 5% of the sales calls to stay in touch with the market. Maybe you're lucky and you will catch me even there.
Fantastic. And we'll put links when we publish the podcast. Look, a big thank you, Philip. It's been really good conversation, really good to catch up.
It was my pleasure.
Exciting to start the year like this as well.
Great.
Was a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thanks, guys.